Hello, how are you all? I'm going to do some books. I'm going to talk about books that have been really useful for me as a baker in the past and in going forward in the future, and sort of continue to inspire and to teach and like I always sort of try and espouse that baking it's like a practice. Like you have to keep working at it, and you're never. I never trust anyone who says like, oh, I'm a great baker or anything like that, because I think you have to carry on getting better. So I've put together some books, and I was looking online, just sort of noticed that there's loads and loads of books out there that look really, really rubbish. Most sourdough bakers or artisan bakers understand that there's this pantheon of great baking literature that's really, really useful, but it just seems like it's only sort of available to those people who are in the know. Okay, so let's get into it. The reason I ever started baking is actually, it's sort of a shame to say, well, not a shame to say actually, it is a Great British Bake Off baker. I never saw the season, but I got given this book by James Morton called Brilliant Bread, and it is very, very simplistic. At the time when I started reading it, it wasn't simplistic at all. It was like opening a whole new world of amazing knowledge and also ignorance. But this is a really good introduction at a beginner's level. I think it's a really accessible book if people just want to start out learning how to make basic white bread. So that's the guy with his fancy, nice little cardigan on. But there's all sorts in here, some really nice things. But I've followed quite a few of the recipes in here through the years, and it's never failed me. So I fully endorse James Morton's book. There's a couple of other books in the sort of beginners area which I think which are really fun and good. Richard Burtonnet has got a few books which are a little bit more professional, but he does have one called Crumb, and I don't have it. But I have read it, and it is really good, and it comes highly recommended by those who have got it. And then we're going to go on to the medium bracket now. There's a book which I did own at one point, but I don't know where it's gone, so if someone out there has got it, but it's the Tivoli Road bakery book by Michael James and Pippa James. And I think Tivoli Road is in Melbourne, I think. I've never been to the bakery, but if you follow their Instagram, it's incredible. And that book is beautiful. Like, I absolutely loved that book, and it wasn't too expensive. But that's a good medium range book. The reason that I put it in the medium range is that I seem to remember it being quite technical in terms of the language. So there's a little bit of like pre-learning you had to do before getting into it. But it was good. It had like a lot of imagery and a lot of like technical bases. So it was a good place to start. We're also, this is a really cool book. A friend of mine at the bakery's got this one. It's called Bread, Cake, Donut, Pudding. And it's written by Justin Galay, who was a head baker at St John in London and now works at Bread Ahead, I think. And he is a super well respected guy. And he's made this really colourful, cool book. Which has got, because it's got the things like donuts and other things like that, it's kind of relatively technical, but it's a really like colourful and fun book to follow. I really liked it when I saw it, and I thought, yeah, that's a goer. So have a look at that. Next one up is Tartine 1. I've got Tartine number 3 here. Tartine 1 is, how do I put this? Chad Robinson from Tartine. He's sort of like the poster boy of the new sourdough artisan bread making revolution, and for good reason. Like, he's super experienced. He's worked in France, and he's worked in some of the best bakeries in America, obviously, before setting up Tartine in San Francisco. Him and his partner as well, Liz Pruitt, both incredible bakers, and they've made amazing books. The thing is with these books, which I just bear in mind, is the first one, he assumes that everyone knows how to make sourdough from the beginning, and also there's an assumption that everyone has the same access to the flour that he has. The thing is that the flour that people are using in those books or in America has a much higher absorption rate and also has a much stronger gluten strength. So what I would say is I'd exercise caution with using Tartine 1 and tartine number 3. Just lower the hydration a little bit because we don't have the same level of gluten strength in the flour that we have here. Otherwise you'll end up in an absolute mess. And that's why it's sort of gone in the medium to professional bracket, because it is really hard to handle some of the doughs that they talk about. And we'll come on to tartine 3 in a little bit. We're now moving up to professional level. Jeffery Hammelman is the first professional baking book that I was given as like a sort of studying guide. If there was a university course in artisan sourdough baking, Jeffery Hammelman's bread would be the top of your reading list, and it would be like the top of your reading list for every year, basically. It is an absolute Bible, and especially for the baking that we do at Leeds Bread Co-op, has sort of acted as a foundation stone for a lot of the formulas that we use there, and I have never baked a bad loaf of bread from that book. It is in the professional level, but it's actually really well explained, and I think it is accessible actually for people who are in the sort of amateur level as well. It's super detailed. It's very illustrative, and it's so detailed and so good. If I could recommend one book from this list for people who are really wanting to take baking seriously, I'd say Jeffery Hammelman's bread is right up there. Another one that's in that same bubble as well is Peter Reinhart's Bread Baker's Apprentice. Pretty much on a similar standing. I mean, if you got both books, if you got one or the other, like that both, and like Peter Reinhart is a legend within sort of sourdough baking circles. So as is Jeffery Hammelman. So Peter Reinhart, Bread Baker's Apprentice, is super good, super good. Another one that's sort of in that sort of pantheon of people, Dan Lepard, British guy. I've got 2 books here. Dan Lepard and Richard Whittington. Know nothing about Richard Whittington, but Baking with Passion. This is all right. It's a few cakes. It's mainly cakes in there actually, but this one's a bit better. The original one of this doesn't focus on European breads, the handmade loaf, but this one's more specifically towards European breads. In the professional sort of range, we have Tartine number 3. Tartine number 3 is sort of an elaboration on Tartine number 1, which is Tartine number 1 essentially is sort of is encouraging people to really push the hydration in their loaves in order to get a really nice open crumb structure. And they're not necessarily looking for lots of volume in the loaf, but just a really dark caramelized crust. Tartine number 3 takes that idea and then sort of builds upon it, and then sort of starts to work more on alternative grains. So you're looking at like emmer, kamut. You're also looking at like buckwheat and toasted groats, different types of rye blends and different like types of extraction rates in your flour as well. So finally we've got going right up your own crumb, like this is the top echelon now. We have Modernist Bread. This is by Nathan, look at that rock, Mervold, and Francisco Magoya. This is one of 5 volumes of an entire book just about bread. Look at the thickness of that. And this is an encyclopedia about bread, basically. I think it's about £600 if you buy it new, all 5 volumes. I've only got one, and I'm lending it at the moment, and it just has absolutely everything you ever wanted to know about bread. It's also got some incredible photography. This first book is a lot to do with like the history of bread and baking. Across the 5 volumes, there is nothing that hasn't been covered, that hasn't already been explored, and then they've also explored more things through like scientific experiments and all sorts of stuff themselves that they've covered in the books. So it is just a compendium of everything. If you really love bread and you're willing to just dive your headlong into all this stuff, Modernist is next level good.